in the Q&A panel. These may be posted anonymously. Please indicate the speaker to whom you are referring your questions to. Second, the moderators will choose questions and read them out during the open forum. And lastly, the host reserves the right to remove in-webinar participants who send rude, inappropriate questions or messages. We would like to remind you that this is an academic discussion. Hence, everyone is expected to express their opinions in a professional manner. With that, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. How are you, Narvi?
I'm great, Chelsea. Allow me to say hello to our audience. I am truly excited to learn more about the trajectory of renewable energy in the country, and I am sure that our audience is equally excited to learn from this webinar. How about you, Chelsea?
Yes, same with you, Norby. I'm also looking forward to learning about renewable energy as a viable path towards energy security and sustainability.
That's correct. We'll also learn about the current status of renewable energy, its challenges, as well as the opportunities that come with it.
Lastly, I've heard that we get to learn about the possible actions, such as the policies and programs that will be discussed in this webinar.
Wow, this is such a fully loaded session indeed. So to start off, may I call on Dr. Henalito A. Sevilla Jr., the Dean of the UP Asian Center, to deliver his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Chelsea, and the other one. Okay, Norby. Okay, to Director Mylene Kapungkol of the Department of Energy, Dean Tuni Lavenia of the Ateneo School of Government, Mr. Ayan Rivera, the Movement for Climate Change, Mr. Arturo Tajo from the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Cities, students and friends of UP Asian Center. Magandang hapon sa ating lahat. Happy New Year to all of you. In behalf of the organizing students who enrolled in the Philippine Studies 297, or otherwise known as Resource Competition in Philippine Foreign Relation course, and of the UP Asian Center, it is my honor to welcome you all in this forum. The discussions about energy security is important for every economy anywhere in the globe, especially so that planning for economic growth and industrialization must require a critical consideration in how an economy will be able to access a steady supply and affordable sources of energy, such as crude oil, gas, and coal, in the long and sustainable term. The experiences of big and successful economies in the Western Hemisphere, including the rising ones in the eastern side of the globe, such as China and India, would all tell us that the vital role of these energy forms and their past, present, and future national economic planning, and therefore a strategic tool in their national security and development. China, for instance, has started to become a net importer of crude oil since 1993, in spite of its massive energy reserves in its own. And it continues exploring the four corners of the globe to find energy sources for its future supplies. With China's rising power and grandiose economic project under the Belt and Road Initiative, it is expected that China will do everything it can do to ensure energy supply to run its economy in the future. In another account, history also would tell us that geopolitical and geoeconomic rivalries among countries can regularly occur as multinational corporations or TNCs, regional countries and superpowers tend to influence, compete, dominate, and dictate the supply chains of the strategic community. The power rivalries, conflicts, and wars being experienced in the Middle East and North African region in the past decades were mostly associated with the control of crude oil supply, as well as its relative massive militarization, by regional countries to upgrade their security capability to guard their national resources against potentially invading countries, thanks to the massive dollar revenues from oil to finance this military buildup in MENA region. In addition, for energy supply countries, the mere presence of oil and gas do not also guarantee internal stability, economic prosperity, and even democratization. Although some countries are able to demonstrate high income, other countries in MENA or other regions that supply their strategic resources suffered financially due to corruption and other forms of financial mismanagement. And you heard just now, a few days ago, we heard about Kazakhstan, a Central Asian country with huge oil and mineral resources, has its government resigned due to pressure from its own people who took to the streets in the capital to protest fuel price increases. These examples, the examples that I mentioned above, can create uncertainty of oil supply, as well as create direct and indirect impact on the consuming or importing economies like the Philippines. Geopolitical conflict and internal instability in countries or region that supplies oil or gas for several reasons create an erratic movement of oil and gas prices in the international markets and eventually affected or distort prices of basic commodities and services that are very much dependent from the imported energy. Against this background, this webinar today seeks to evaluate the condition of renewable energy in the Philippines as a clean and environmental friendly alternatives or complementary sources of energy from the imported crude oil and gas or coal in the country's national energy security and sustainability. As we will talk about the trajectory of renewable energy in the country, perhaps the following questions need also to be addressed. What is the current state of the country's renewable energy? Second, what are the challenges in the full implementation of the Republic Act number 9513 or Renewable Energy Act of 2008? Third, has there been a significant improvement in the country's renewable energy supplies since the implementation of the Republic Act 9513? If there is, has this improvement been visible in terms of the country's total importation of energy, particularly crude oil and gas? And lastly is, what is the future or trajectory of the Philippine renewable energy? I hope that you will learn many things from the lecture and discussions of our esteemed speakers and reactors. Once again, let me welcome you at magandang hapon sa ating lahat. Maraming salamat.
Thank you so much, Dean Sevilla, for the opening remarks and for highlighting there's clearly a demand, a rising demand for clean energy, and for also sharing the global context of the oil and demand of supply. So thank you so much, Dean Sevilla, and hopefully our discussants and our speakers will be able to answer some of your questions that you have said a while ago. So maraming salamat po ulit. To introduce our first speaker for today, with more than 30 years of experience in the electric power industry, covering planning and design, advisory services, policy development, and project management on various reforms in the power and renewable sectors, including total electrification programs involving international donor and locally funded projects. As OIC Director of REMB, Ms. Kapungkol oversees the development and execution of policies, plans, and programs to attain the objectives of promoting the exploration, development, and utilization of renewable energy in the country, and promotion of biofuel programs. Director Kapungkol spearheaded the development and promulgation of critical RE policy support mechanisms, such as the rules on renewable portfolio standards, green energy option program, and the establishment of RE market and various ongoing policy development for the RE sector. Our first speaker, the officer in charge of the Renewable Energy Management Bureau of the Department of Energy, Director Mylene Kapungkol.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Chelsea, and to Dean Sibilia. Gandang hapon po sa inyong lahat, to our distinguished guests. It's a great pleasure for me to be discussing to you updates on the renewable energy programs in the country, particularly our plans and program. And of course, as requested by the UP Asian Center Forum, I should be tackling on the challenges and the targets that the Department of Energy has for the renewable energy sector. Not only that, but for the entire energy sector as a whole. So next slide, please. So I will be covering the following. So first, let me introduce you to the Renewable Energy Act and the Department of Energy, where we are now, meaning status as of 2020. 2021, we're still gathering the data and statistics and the goals and objectives, plans and programs that we have developed based on our National Renewable Energy Program covering 2020 to 2040. And of course, based on the NREP, or the National Renewable Energy Program, you can see where we are headed, including other policies that the Department of Energy, with the leadership of our Secretary Alfonso G. Cusi, has been developing and preparing. So these are not just plans, but there are several programs, plans, and projects that are now being prepared, particularly by our Bureau, to ensure that the target renewable energy share in the power supply sector will be met. Next slide, please. So we all know that the Renewable Energy Act was passed or enacted in 2008. And it's more than, I think, 10 years that we have been implementing. And the purpose is, of course, to accelerate the exploration, development, and utilization, including commercialization of renewable energy in the country. Many laws have been passed in the before Renewable Energy Act, and they're focused on the indigenous and renewable energy development. But this one, the RE 9513, or the RE Act, really put in place the cohesive plans and program on how to develop renewable energy in the country. Of course, the purpose is to achieve energy security and sustainability for the country. So it's better to use what you have than import, because it's volatile in terms of price and supply. And of course, when you have cleaner or clean energy resources, we avert climate change, because we're one of the vulnerable countries in the world as a result of the climate change. So we experience a lot of typhoon and calamities that are attributed to this, sea water level rising, and some other negative effect of a cleaner or let's say not so cleaner energy resources. Next slide, please. So where we are now, as of 2020, actually, there is about 2,338 megawatt of additional RE installation that had been built and started commissioning. And this brought us about 221.35 billion in cost investment. So you can see here in the chart below the summary on a per year basis, the RE development in the country. And you may notice that from 2014 to 2016, there have been a lot of renewable energy. And this is because of the feed-in tariff and the start of the full implementation of the feed-in tariff system, the net metering, and some other RE policy mechanism. So you may see also that starting 2017, there was a slow, no? Because some of the mandatory programs of the RE law has not been developed. So later on, I'll discuss that. Next slide, please. So where we are now as of 2020 in terms of installed capacity and generation. When we say installed capacity, this is like a drum or a case, now wherein it has a volume or ability to generate certain specific generation. And the generation actually is the actual production of those facilities. So in terms of installed generating capacities, as of 2020, the country has about 26,286 megawatt of various energy technologies, wherein 42% is about coal. And renewable is only 29%. So oil-based is about 16% and natural gas is 13%. So you can see that the coal is dominating the energy in terms of capacity. In terms of power generation, so this is the actual produced energy that is supplied to the customer. You may note that coal is about 57% and renewable is about 21%. So again, coal is dominating the energy generation mix of the country, which as of 2020 is about 101.7 terawatt hour. So the biggest challenge we have right now actually is how to increase the renewable energy share in terms of capacity and in terms of generation for the power supply. Next slide, please. Now, since the start of the RE Act implementation, we have put in place a lot of policy mechanisms as of 2020. And these provide investment support, like ensuring energy securities, as well as creating job and investment, powering investment in the country, as well as facilitating the consumer choice. Now, we are now heading towards the establishment of the RE market and the green energy auction program, which later I will discuss. And of course, we have already put in place what we call the renewable energy or the renewable portfolio standards, which is a mandatory program of the government in terms of buying or procuring renewable energy by the mandated participants. No, so later I'll venture into that. Next slide, please. Now, in our Philippine Energy Plan that was recently promulgated, covering 2020 to 2040 planning horizon, you may see that the clean energy, so this is about renewable energy and natural gas, since these are indigenous in the country, is seen to increase to 63% share. No? This is under what we call the clean energy scenario. With regards to the 44% share under the reference year, which is 2019. So again, both the government and the National Renewable Energy Plan, as espoused under the Philippine Energy Plan, is pushing for a cleaner and sustainable energy sources for the country. Next slide, please. Now, the National Renewable Energy Program, as I mentioned earlier, covers about 2020 to 2040. And our set goal is to reach 35% RE share by 2030, and by 2040, it should be by 50%. Why 35? When the national when the RE Act was enacted into law in 2008, actually the share of RE in both capacity and generation is about 34%. So over the years, for the last 10 years, we saw renewable energy share as diminishing or dwindling. So with the National Renewable Energy Plan and with the target energy security, attaining sustainable development, mitigating climate change, improve the capacity, not only of the Department of Energy and stakeholders, but the customer as well. And a holistic approach to the government developing the renewable energy, we hope to target, or we hope to meet the 35% RE share by 2030. Next slide, please. Now, what we are sharing to you right now is the clean energy scenario as reflected in the Philippine Energy Plan 2020 to 2040. As mentioned earlier, under the 50% RE share, now, which is the high demand, we would be needing around 54,655 in terms of megawatt by 2040. So you can see here the various technologies and then the existing capacities. No? So I won't delve on this technology, but you can see that from the current capacity and demand of 21, so we're seeing a demand of about 54 gigawatt, and from a current capacity of 34, we're seeing an increased capacity of around 114.6 gigawatt in the country. So if all the policies and mechanisms have been put in place. Next slide, please. Now, in achieving the target, no, as mentioned earlier, we're hoping to achieve 35% RE share by 2030 in terms of power generation. So what we have laid down here in your left side are the RE policy mechanism and program and some other programs that the Department of Energy is currently implementing and developing. So given our huge and tremendous potential RE resources, we hope that these policies will be able to make use of how we will be able to meet our target goals, no? By way of facilitating investment, offering customer choice in choosing renewable energy as their supply, by doing both mandatory and voluntary. When we say mandatory, there are certain participants in the power industry that are required to source renewable energy in their supply to their customers. And there are also programs and projects like the competitive RE zones that facilitate investment, meaning it entails easier connection by this renewable energy facilities in the grid, no, for supply. And what we are now currently developing to support also these policies and programs are the open and competitive selection process, wherein the Department of Energy, particularly the Renewable Energy Management Bureau, has been doing resource assessment. And when we do the technical study and come up with a feasible capacity that can be offered to the private sector, then we conduct open and competitive selection process, or OXP. So usually what we conduct OXP are geothermal and hydro. Also, those service contracts that were not able to pursue or terminated by the DOE will be part of this open and competitive selection process, so that other potential investor may be able to offer their services in developing these resources. Geothermal, as you may recall, were second to the US previously, but now we're on third, no, to US and Indonesia, and we wanted to revert to the second uh, largest producer of geothermal. So that's why currently, right now, the Department of Energy is developing a support program for geothermal energy, and particularly the de-risking, because geothermal development is so expensive. So yun po, we're trying to de-risk and provide market. No? One of the problem that our geothermal facilities is because there are instances that the steam is vented, so they go back, either go back to the underground and will not be used for energy. No, so, and that's because of some market mechanism, or the WESM policy. So we're reviewing how we will be able to come up with a mass dispatch policy for all RE. And of course, the waste to energy is new. Um, and there's a lot of municipalities who are venturing into waste to energy projects. And what we're now doing is to come up with a policy that will spell out the development of waste to energy in the country. So just to note that waste to energy is not about encouraging waste generation. But what we are trying to do is to make use of that waste, no, generated into useful energy. And of course, what is now being pursued by the DOE is what we call the offshore wind development roadmap, now with assistance of World Bank and the UK Embassy and some other donors. We're now developing an offshore wind program for the country, considering based on the study by World Bank, there is about 175 gigawatt of potential. And this can serve actually the demand of the Asian countries. So imagine if we were able to facilitate integration and sharing of energy, then the country has a potential, no, eventually, of being an exporter of energy. Next slide, please. Now, so I discussed this. So these are the policy mechanism and the status. For the feed-in tariff, we have already completed for the solar, wind, biomass. Now, what is missing is the run-of-river hydro, which still has about 100 megawatt of unsubscribed, but there's already an ongoing competition on that aspect. So anytime soon, it will be completed, meaning the installation target of 250 for run-of-river hydro will be soon completed. For the net metering, this is currently ongoing. The Energy Regulatory Commission has already relaxed some of the rules that were perceived to be barriers in the earlier stages of the net metering implementation. And the Department of Energy has issued a policy recently that it will be now available in off-grid areas, no, as long as they are connected to the distribution utilities. And the Department of Energy will soon issue what we call the net metering guidebook that will help practitioners as well as consumer in coming up or in deciding whether or not they will be you know participating in the net metering program for the country. And of course, the Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard is one of the flagship RE mechanisms that the Department of Energy has recently promulgated. And the effectivity is about 2020, no, as a compliance year. So right now we're monitoring the compliance. But please note that we have issued the rules in 2018 just to give the mandated participants enough time, no, to collect or to prepare for their compliance plan for the Renewable Portfolio Standard. For the RPS off-grid, we have deferred the implementation. One is because the COVID has enabled us to really handheld or assist the generators and the distribution utilities in off-grid areas. So these are the small islands in the country that are served usually by conventional fuel and very little RE. So we are seeing a lot of potential on this, and we're starting to really prepare, no, given the pandemic situation right now, um, on how we will be able to address the implementation of this RPS on grid. Now, the Green Energy Option Program is a customer program. No? This is like a retail competition wherein a customer with 100 kilowatt demand can select their supply, no, renewable energy from the RE supplier duly issued operating permit by the Department of Energy. So we're now in full swing in implementing and marketing the Green Energy Option Program. And of course, the Renewable Energy Program is a venue where the RE certificates, the compliance to the RPS are being facilitated. Eventually, what we are seeing is a voluntary RE market wherein consumers can also trade, no, in the RE market. Next slide, please. Now for RE Trust Fund, we're now starting collecting from the funding agencies, PAGCOR, PCSO, so that the money can be used to develop capacity building, piloting some innovative approaches to RE development, no, and some other technologies or programs that will help renewable energy development in the country. So as I already mentioned, the other RE support mechanism here, but let me discuss the Green Energy Auction Program. Anytime soon, the Department of Energy will be issuing the notice of auction. So we're just awaiting for the final recommendation and approval of the management of the DOE. So initially, what we will be auctioning is around 2,000 megawatts. Starting delivery will be from 2023 onwards. No, but after that, there will be a yearly auction. So this is actually an innovative program that was developed in lieu of the feed-in tariff, because a lot of investors are requesting for the continuation of the feed-in tariff, but because the Department of Energy is really concerned on the rates now, because the feed-in tariff rates are passed on to the consumers. But this one will allow distribution utility to take on some of the capacities, and the competitiveness of the auction or the bids that will be taken will surely be beneficial to the consumers in the country. Next slide, please. Now, the future that we're looking at in terms of energy is, again, in terms of renewable energy, is to be able to achieve 35% RE share in the power generation mix by 2030. We're now pursuing also the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, wherein 5% of energy savings on oil products and electricity will be achieved by 2040, and development of emerging and innovative technologies like e-vehicles in transport should be able to penetrate at least 10%. And of course, the continuing information communication technology in the energy supply chains. Now, particularly right now, we're having a study on the potential expansion of the solar rooftop program. So it's not only net metering, but we're looking at the possible of a list of all the available rooftop for solar generation and then injection in the grid, to add for solar or additional supply for the grid. And of course, the smart grid technology. And of course, energy resiliency. You know that almost yearly we're having problems with typhoons, and we hope that we continue to be resilient and achieve climate-proof energy infrastructure. So again, I think this is the end of my presentation. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you very much for that very informative presentation, Director Kapungkol. Guys, let's give Director Kapungkol a virtual round of applause. Okay. Chelsea, I like how Director Kapungkol made mention of the challenge on energy generation and the effort of the government to actually transition into a more environmentally friendly energy mix through renewable energy. There's also a mention about the need for us to highlight and localize SDGs in terms of the involvement of the various sectors in energy generation. What do you think, Chelsea?
Well, I think also, Norby, just based from Director Mylene's discussion, we can really see that from RE Act 2008, it really paved the way to accelerate the exploration and the diversification of the energy resources that we have here in the country. That's why there's a lot of question of, are we ready since 2008 and where are we now? And I hope that through her discussion, a lot of us were, in a way, enlightened of what is
That's
the current
correct.
situation that we have right now in terms of the renewable energy context here in the Philippines. So I guess, Norby, that's a perfect introduction to the discussion on the trajectory of renewable energy in the Philippines. And I think it's time for us to look into it using the Southeast Asian perspective.
That's correct. So we have to be very, very mindful of these issues. So let me introduce the second resource person. Attorney Antonio Lavinia, GST, is a teacher, thinker, leader, lawyer, human rights and climate justice advocate, and social entrepreneur. He has been an educator for decades and is currently professor of law, philosophy, governance, and politics in a dozen universities and learning institutions in the Philippines. Attorney Tony is known for his climate change and environmental expertise and his longtime advocacy of human rights, indigenous people's rights, good governance practices, and social entrepreneurship. He has been and is a leader of many Philippine and global institutions and organizations. He is widely published in the fields of law and governance, environment, human rights, social accountability, and social entrepreneurship. At present, he is the Associate Director for Climate Policy and International Relations at Manila Observatory and Professor of Energy and Environment at the Ateneo de Manila University School of Government. Please welcome Attorney Tony Lavinia.
So thank you. Thank you, Norby. Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts about the trajectory, the direction of Southeast Asia. And I was asked to do it for energy, but also to do it overall for GHG emissions. No? I think it's important to bear that in mind, that to understand the trajectory of Southeast Asia in terms of energy and renewables, it must be explicitly linked to actually what we do with respect to our forest. Because Southeast Asia, in particular, Indonesia, and the countries of what we call Indochina, so that's Vietnam, Laos, PDR, and even the Philippines, to the extent we still have extensive forests that can be used both for usual use of forest timber and those needs, but also for biomass, and therefore also linked to energy. So when I actually work on energy in the Philippines or elsewhere in Southeast Asia, I always emphasize that the work must also be through energy and forestry. So climate must be through both those lens. No? What I'd like to do to just provoke you to think about where we are going is actually to start by showing you the commitments that our countries of Southeast Asia made in Glasgow, Scotland, in the United Kingdom, in the 26th conference of the parties that was held last November, and I'll share my screen for that. I wasn't able to do the PowerPoint. As you know, all of us are having mini medical crisis in our homes. I'm okay, but we have a small situation here that I have to deal with. So I just didn't have the time to put it together into a PowerPoint. No, but I'll go right direct to the source of what I would have wanted to show for this. I mean, and this is from the ASEAN Center for Energy, and they analyze what the countries of the ASEAN, and let's just use Southeast Asia and make it equivalent to ASEAN, no, for our purpose, to show lang what the directions are for our countries in terms of renewable energy, in terms of GHG emissions, in general. So you see, for example, there were various statements, commitments that were made in Glasgow. Some directly related to energy, some that are not as directed but are still relevant from the point of view of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. No? See here, you will see, for example, for the coal phase out, which was a statement by several countries, you have Brunei saying yes to it, Indonesia and the Philippines partially to it. Both actually made reservations about explicitly prohibiting or explicitly not doing any more coal in the future. Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar said no to it. Singapore said yes to it. Vietnam, very important, because Vietnam is really the country now that is the fastest in growth in Southeast Asia, and Vietnam said yes to it. Thailand did not join that. You will see for methane, and much of methane is also related to energy, although the bulk of it is agriculture. You will see that Indonesia said yes to it, the Philippines said yes to it, and Vietnam said yes to it, but not the other countries. I should include there deforestation, the statement on deforestation. The Philippines joined it. Indonesia joined it, but then denied its joining the day after. One of the big areas that could help in terms of changing the energy trajectory in our countries is to have an interconnected green grid. And there you will see that only Cambodia and Myanmar joined that, and not the other countries. And none joined product efficiency targets. But very curious, and this, which we're talking about trajectory, we're not talking about current. Current is only useful in sense of how we will proceed from the current to the goal. And there you see Brunei, Laos PDR, Malaysia, Myanmar, and Vietnam. And then there again is Vietnam, no? Taking net zero targets at 2050. But Indonesia and Thailand have different timelines. 2060 for Indonesia, and that's mostly because of forest rather than energy. Thailand 2065. Cambodia naman and Philippines ang walang target doon, no? For net zero. But I suspect the Philippines will take a target also of net zero 2050 or 2060. The NDC of the Philippines, which I came in late for the director's presentation, but the NDC of the Philippines, if I analyze it, will require it to take a 2050 or leads towards a 2050 net zero commitment. Now, this net zero target commitments is big, but they're in the context of NDCs, they're in the context of support, expectation of support by ASEAN countries from developed countries on how we will get there. And as I said, that will not all be forestry. Huge parts of that should actually be, sorry, that's not just all energy, because huge parts of that will have to be from forestry as well, and maybe eventually agriculture. And when you talk about energy, it is not only going to be combustion for fuel, for power, electric power, but a lot of it also is related to transportation, which is easier because I think in transportation, including our car fleets, I think the economies of it will operate in such a way that even if you wanted to be a laggard, we won't be able to afford to laggard. Future mass transit systems, future vehicles will all be electric, and you know, it's just a matter of time before we have to catch up. But the challenge still for us to get to where we want to be in terms of a net zero target, in terms of, you know, an energy system that's, was my view as a climate advocate, climate justice advocate, is we want to move as fast as possible to zero emissions, GHG emissions energy system. In other words, not using coal and oil and natural gas at some point. I mean, my preference, I think it's doable to do that in 10 to 20 years. When we don't have to wait 40 to 50, we don't have to wait until 2050 to get that done. Certainly, there's a political reason for doing that. We just saw that in Odette, how Odette has wreaked havoc on, you know, large part of the Philippines, and many of which were critical tourism areas, critical for livelihoods. That event will keep on happening, and they will not have the luxury of rebuilding, you know, as like it used to be before, because you rebuild in 10 years, 5 to 10 years, you can rebuild, but then the event happens again. So the political motivation for doing it is there. And I think the technical and economic aspects of the energy transition is also there. A lot of my academic work and my teaching in Ateneo School of Government has been about showing that the technologies are there. We know the policies that work. We just have to make the decision and take the steps necessary to prepare for implementing the decision. Clearly, in terms of the goal, most of the countries are Southeast Asia are actually there. As you saw there, it's only the Philippines and Malaysia. Was it Malaysia? So only the Philippines and Cambodia. No, Malaysia has a 2050 target. Only the Philippines and Cambodia has no target. But I don't think that they will hesitate to adopt the target within the year, before we go back to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt for COP27. Singapore doesn't have a specific date, but it does say second half of the century. And I think Singapore will also be under pressure to probably do 2050 and not just 2060. Now, the question is, where do we start? And we have to start from today and where we are. Thankfully, there's a very good report, and I'll show that to you now, that just came out in October 2021 in the ASEAN on the pathways to get to our goal, including an analysis of all the NDCs, no? And I'll recommend that that to you, no? This is the report that I'm talking about. Just to give you the title of the report, the State of Climate report, and the vision is 2050. That really is the vision. But take note that the starting point is in fact we are one of the largest growing fossil fuel use, greenhouse gas emissions increase region in the world, not because of the vibrant economies of Southeast Asia. In fact, if you add East Asia, which means the Koreas, Japan, and China, we are going to be on top of, globally on top of the regions that are going to increase. So the fact that the ASEAN, before Glasgow together, was able to articulate a climate vision for 2050 that essentially is consistent with the push for a global net zero target of 2050. And here I don't want to debate what net zero is. That's not the point that can be a debate by itself. No, then it's quite interesting. Not quite interesting, but actually inspiring that we have that. But the thing is, we have to start from where we are, and I wanna point that out to you in the figures that this report puts out for the emissions, current emissions, or let's say current. It depends on what exactly the report. By the way, this report just tells you that economically the losses from climate change, the loss and damage from climate change is, justifies the most radical actions to take. It doesn't mince words about concluding that. So while there might need to be nuances in terms of how we get there, but there is no debate that we need to be there by 2050, because this region, as you know, the Philippines, Indonesia, archipelagos, for example, all the big cities of the region most of them at least are in the coastal areas, are going to be the most affected. So here's trajectories of that. This is LULUCF as on land use change and forestry, and you still see here this growth that's going. I mean, the sequestration potential is still being lost, including there, but Vietnam is the one that's leading the pack in terms of lessening emissions from LULUCF. Vietnam is quite ahead. I know that also because I do work in that area on LULUCF and RED Plus in Vietnam, and they're really ahead of us. Unfortunately, the Philippines, as you can see, is not doing that well in this area. But here's the energy, the energy data for the region in terms of combustion, and you see the how it's divided into sectors: electricity, manufacturing, residential, transport. The transport is huge, as you can see this is regional in general. Of course, electricity is big. I mean, but I would say it's electricity followed by transport, and then manufacturing industries. Residential is not too bad yet in the Philippines, and you can see that agriculture and forestry is not too big in terms of share, but they're all growing. And so you need, if you essentially, and this is of course up to 2018, no? And I suppose that's still the trajectory now. But if you want to reach your 2050 target by 2030, you need this to be falling down. And the NDCs, the national determined contributions of the different countries, is the one that will lead this to fall. That's the breakdown now per country of how the emissions can be divided within sectors. So Philippines, for example, you see it's electricity and resident and transport also. That's big. Manufacturing is not too big in the Philippines, as you know. We don't have a lot of factories elsewhere. You can see in Lao that it is electricity that's the biggest. What's interesting here, Indonesia is not too bad, no, in terms of this is also measures intensity. So you see, for example, Malaysia has made progress in terms of intensity, carbon intensity. This is just the link between carbon use, CO2 emissions, and GDP. No, this one is interesting because you can see how it's linked, and the Philippines, for example, is over here, quite low, because we're not, unfortunately, we're not. Our GDP per capita is still quite low. Here's a graph that you can see of what's needed. You have to have decarbonization between 2020 to 2030 if you want to get to the sustainable energy transition. Essentially, we have 10 years to do that, or 9 years to do that, give or take a year or two. All our indices actually pointing towards that. This, I'll just skim through this now. You also have data on energy and wind and energy in overall in ASEAN. Solar is this one is installed capacity already. See, the Philippines is, you would have seen that in the presentation, it's not doing too well, no? Compared to, is this one Thailand? I think is Thailand. This one is Vietnam. Look at Vietnam. Vietnam is the star in the region in terms of economic performance and in terms of greenhouse gas performance, renewable energy performance. That's why I need to cite from here. This is wind and solar combined. So here you have Philippines. I think our wind is not too, offshore wind is 0, onshore wind, and you have solar. But look at Thailand. No? Well, Vietnam is still low, but they have increased a lot because they started late also. So if we adopted already a 2050 regional vision, that really means that we need to achieve peak emissions after 2030. Philippines says in its NDC 2030 and peak emissions, and then net zero emissions after that. The analysis here, and I won't go to that because I don't want to go to the different NDCs for every countries. there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of our own NDC, the Philippines, and in terms of the NDCs of the different countries to be able to meet the 2030 and then overall the 2050 goal. So my conclusion is, vision-wise, we have the vision in the region. Ground truth reality is we're very far from putting into place strategies to achieve that vision, both short-term by 2030 and long-term by 2060 or 2065. And so there's still a lot of work to be done for us to get there. In the meantime, we have to suffer through Typhoons Odette and other typhoons like that and other events like that in the next few years. You know, obviously one thing you were gonna ask is, why should we even contribute, given that historically we haven't contributed as much? Well, the answer is historically that's true, but we are increasing, and soon we will, you know, if we don't do it, we will overtake others that we should not be overtaking. And two, this is very important. While we might be low compared to the big emitters, United States, China, Japan, Australia, but we are quite huge in terms of the rest of the world, especially Philippines, well, especially Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Philippines. We're actually higher than most other countries of the world. And so I always tell people we should change that, because we do not want to contribute to our own destruction. So thank you. I'll end there and just answer questions later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dean Tony. And hopefully you and your family members are safe and healthy. And thank you so much for that very informative discussion. Truly, I've seen how climate change really impact the opportunity for renewable energy here within the ASEAN. And I've also seen how we need to decarbonize our energy in order for us to successfully transition towards sustainable energy. How about you, Norby? What did you think about Attorney Lavinia's discussion?
It's good that Dean Tony mentioned about the need for us to look at energy from the lens of agriculture and forestry, which are both from natural resource. That I'm really, I was really shocked to know that only 5 countries said yes to the phase out of coal, with 2 committed to actually do it partially, and Philippines is actually included in that commitment. And that there's net zero target for Cambodia and Philippines, meaning there's no coal. There's no new coal, and others like Brunei, Singapore, Vietnam are actually included in those commitments for particularly for the phase out of the coal. So it's very important for us to also note that we're doing this not just because we're localizing the SDG, which basically calls for us to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. But because we're talking about our resource, we're talking about the energy, and this is our energy source is very limited, and so we have to be very responsible in using and generating this energy, and in using and maximizing these for the industries that we build, especially now. So I think we're all good for the very informative sharing of our resource person. So we can now proceed with the first reactor. Take it away, Chelsea.
All right, so for our first reactor for today, he is a veteran DRR practitioner, humanitarian worker, trainer, and community organizer. Mr. Arturo worked as project coordinator and humanitarian assistance project officer of international NGOs involved in the Yolanda response. Under his watch, ICSC's Recharge Philippines has deeply planted the Solar Scholars, Reserve Corps, and TechSPACs program, small island resilience, and energy democracy programs in survivor communities. And they broadened the ICSC's network of allies and partners in the just energy transition movement among local governments, CSOs, people's organizations, and electric co-ops in Eastern Visayas. He is also co-founder and vice president of the community-based DRR organization, the Moring Volunteers Emergency Response Team. Our first reactor for today's webinar, Mr. Arturo Tahup, Associate for Community Resilience, Institute for Community and Sustainable Cities. Take it away, Mr. Tahup.
Okay, good afternoon. Maupay kulop, Inuwaray. Could you please allow me to share my presentation? Is it okay? Okay, thank you. My topic is what is the impact of renewable energy on communities. I'll focus on the laylayan, specifically the off-grid, the most vulnerable communities on the front lines of the climate crisis. However, I'll also tackle during my discussion the impacts of renewables on on-grid communities. So the title of my presentation is "A Spark of Renewable Energy Can Create a Burst of Benefits for the Community." So a spark of renewable energy can provide benefits to homes, to livelihoods, to critical community facilities, to community service. So that's the central point of my presentation. But before proceeding, I'd like to discuss the framework in how we measure the success of installing renewable energy projects in communities, particularly solar. So the circle there, it's divided into three: hardware, software, and orgware. Hardware refers to the technology, whether it's solar, biomass, wind, etc. But the point is, the hardware should be acceptable, should be affordable, and should be available to the people in a community. Kung wala yun, walang silbi yung hardware. No? Software refers to the information skill, technical know-how to assemble, to install, operate, maintain, repair, and decommission these RE systems. Dito pa lang, ilalatag mo na that one of the major stumbling blocks in fully implementing RE is actually the software or the education. When we talk of advances in technology, in RE technology, tiyak yan, yung Ateneo de Davao, Ateneo, UP, no, Don Bosco, at ibang eskwelahan, maunlad. However, when we talk about the available education that's needed by the locals, the solar technicians, no? In the Philippines, only TESDA offers 3 PB courses. That's PB installation, PB design, and PB repair and servicing. That's often lodged in Taguig and in some TESDA centers in the regions. Case in fact, in Region 8, in Eastern Visayas, where I'm working, isa lang ang doon, no? Nagbibigay ng 3 courses ng TESDA sa Balangiga National Agricultural School. And I heard from my friends that at last, in Tacloban, meron nang ino-offer yung TESDA ng 3 PB. No? So, how can we develop and run the renewable energy industry if we don't have education, appropriate education, trained engineers and technicians, in the same way that you need engineers, technicians to run the automotive industry. So malaking problema yan. Even in the electric co-ops, no, when I asked the people there, Brad, alam mo ba yung Homer? Sagot nung taga-electric co-op na hindi naman siya nasa baba ng struktura. Sir, anong Homer? Di ba sa Simpsons yun? So Homer is a software that's used by RE practitioners in designing a grid, whether it's an off-grid or an on-grid. So kung ang alam ng mga electric co-ops sa Homer, hindi naman lahat ng electric co-ops. Ilang tao sa electric co-ops na ang Homer ay sa Simpsons, malaking sakit ng ulo na yan. Anyway, that's just my point. And the last is the orgware. It's not enough that you have the appropriate hardware and the training, the skills. No? For a RE project in the community to succeed, you need an organization. No? Project structure, organization, management, comprising of roles, stakeholders, and the rules of the games in the project life cycle. Ibig sabihin, hindi pwedeng teknolohiya lang at pagsasanay. Dapat merong organisasyon na mga ngasiwa magtitiyak na magiging sustainable yung RE project. No? Whether co-op yan, whether RE community enterprise, whether samahan. No? Importante yung organisasyon. Hindi magtatagal yung project pag walang organisasyon na tututok dyan. Okay. Now let me proceed to my point. No? How RE benefited the people sa mga laylayan. No? So there are two pictures here. One is the solar home systems or HSS that we rolled out in Suluan Island, the farthest island barangay in Giwan, Eastern Samar. So before the project, they said that, sir, hindi namin kayang bayaran yan. Paano kasi? Akala namin pamimigay lang yan eh. But after conducting an energy assessment, a thorough audit, no, napatunayan namin sa kanila na kaya nilang bayaran. No? They spend 600 to 750 pesos a month to purchase kerosene and battery. No? Battery as a flashlight, kerosene for their gasera. No? And now we deployed a pay-to-own solar home system payable in 2 years, monthly hulog 348. So in other words, no, 50% up to 40% yung savings nila. And the good thing is, after 2 years, kanila na yun. No? So dito pa lang makikita mo na in terms of affordability, in terms of benefits, in terms of preventing black carbon pollution, no? Resulta ng kerosene, pagising mo sa umaga, pag swab test mo yung ilong mo, maitim ang lalabas. No? So ibig sabihin, malaking pakinabang. Punta tayo sa grid tie. These are the typical grid tie packages offered to homes in the grid areas. No? So 540 watt peak, no? Ang bayad mo 49,000, ang savings mo 670. 1.62, the cost is 128,500, savings mo 2,760 and on hanggang sa 5.4 kilowatt, 340,000 ang cost, 8,600. No? Ang mahalaga dito, if you conduct a cost-benefit analysis, makikita mo na yung tinatawag na ala verde, the time when the return of the investment, no, 3 years, 4 years, usually 3 years. After that, the electricity that you're using from solar rooftop ay libre na. No? So yun yung advantages ng RE, particularly solar, sa isang off-grid at on-grid areas. Next, I said a while ago that renewable can also address the problem of quality education, especially in off-grid areas na wala talagang kuryente eskwela. No? So in Suluan Integrated School, we installed a 1.2 kilowatt lithium-ion powered solar generator in early 2020 before the pandemic. No? that serves as a community charging stations because there's no electricity there. And fortunately, when the distance modular learning was implemented, ibig sabihin, modules yan, walang face-to-face. Ang problema, how will you produce learning modules in an off-grid island community? So the usual way to do it is use generators. So sa generator pa lang, laking gastos na. So using the solar generator, no, the school produced 2,512 learning modules for students in school year 2020-2021. In other words, hindi na sila umasa sa diesel power genset, hindi na umasa sa diesel fuel, and most of all, they don't have to print the modules in Poblacion Giwan in the mainland as babalik pa sa Suluan. Sorry. Another case, no, in Tacloban, Scandinavian Elementary School. It's a school on the grid, the ECO, right? However, we also installed the solar generator there to serve as community charging stations kapag bagsak ang grid dahil madalas ang brownout, blackout. At the same time, during the pandemic, nag-produce siya ng 14,000 plus learning modules. No? So, malaki yung pakinabang in terms of reduction of power costs ng eskwelahan. Okay. Next. Lately, no, maalala niyo yung National Vaccination Program. I think late November hanggang late November. Late November ng early December, no. So problema, paano ka magbabakuna sa isang isla na walang kuryente? Walang kuryente health center, no. So we deployed another solar generator there and trained the women health workers, frontliners, how to install it, how to properly use and maintain it. No, the project is the right project at the right place at the right time. Dahil nung re-roll out namin yan, no, tiyempo, bakunahan. Dahil may kuryente na, the vaccination can proceed even at night time. No, because there's solar, you can now power the laptops, the freezers, the lights, no, during the vaccination. And what's the outcome, no? 90% of Suluanons received their first dose of vaccine out of the 1,700 target island population. As a result, Suluan is one of the island barangays in Giwan with the highest vaccination rate. No, malaking tagumpayan considering that the island is 30 meters away from the mainland by boat, and during the amihan, you have to contend with building high Pacific waves, no, and strong winds. So malaking achievement yan, no? Dahil nagkaroon ng kuryente. This is a quote from Engineer Rene Hermo, the chairman of the Gubat St. Anthony Cooperative, the biggest cooperative in the Bicol region. No? He said, quote, investing in renewable energy is not only good for the climate, but is also beneficial for the business and growth of cooperatives. Bago sila nag-install ng solar rooftop, no, gumagastos ang GSAC ng 80,000 kada buwan, 80,000 plus. After installing the rooftop solar, nagkaroon ng reduction ng 30,000 plus pesos sa monthly bill. This is the picture of the main office of GSAC. At kita nyo yung, if I'm not mistaken, this is 30 o 40 kilowatt. And yung naandun na hindi nakikita, no, nagtayo sila ng solar-powered hotel. So, the biggest co-op in Bicol, no, says that RE is not only good for the climate, but is also beneficial for the business and growth of cooperatives. Okay. So ito, bibilisan ko na lang. Sa mga isla, merong solar freezer because Giwan and Eastern Samar is near the Tuna Highway. So kailangan talaga yelo dyan. Ang yelo nanggagaling pa sa Santa Rita, isang tumbling na lang Tacloban na. So in other words, no, nung nag-set up kami ng solar freezer dyan, at least may yelo na. But the problem is, the capacity of the freezer is less than 10% of the demand for ice, for tuna fishing and other marine products. So maliit lang talaga yung capacity niya. Ang kailangan lang gawin, solar ice maker. So kita niyo yung mga kababaihan, sila yung nag-i-install, no, ng panel. Why are we doing it? Because one of the contingency plan, not only of the Sulong-Suluan Association, the women's organizations in Suluan, but also the Suluan Integrated School at yung sa may health center ng Suluan, no? Kapag may darating na bagyo, dahil tansyado na naman natin dahil sa technology kung kailan darating yung bagyo, no? Ina-install nila yung solar, lalo na yung katulad nung nangyari nitong Odette, no? So they uninstalled or dismantled the solar panel, store and keep it for safety, and after the typhoon passes over the island, no, balik rin. Para ibig sabihin, yun yung tinatawag na paraan para ma-achieve yung resilience, no? Magagamit pa rin yung solar kahit na dumaan na yung bagyo dahil linigtas nga. And then bilisan ko na lang, no, the solar ocean beacons, solar floating bantay dagat guardhouse for fisher folk, the solar powered water pumps in San Jose District, Tacloban City, one of the hard hit communities, coastal communities in Tacloban, at the height of Hayan. And kahit kuweba sa Marabot, no, we introduced the solar powered storm shelter. This cave was able to shelter more than 1,000 people, no, at the height of Yolanda. Tapos hanggang ngayon, nung Odette, diyan rin sila lumikas. Pero hindi na sila namumblema na madilim, no? Maayos na yung papanik sa kuweba dahil meron na silang tech packs, no? Solar generators. So this is the homegrown technological solution developed by ICSC, designed and assembled by Yolanda survivors using locally available spare parts. In other words, dapat ang pyesa niyan nabibili sa Tacloban, sa Ormoc, sa Cebu, pinakamalayo Maynila. Bakit? If you rely, there are existing portable solar suitcases in the market, no? However, they are imported. There are spare parts. You have to buy the spare parts from the US and abroad, no? So ito dapat para madaling ma-assemble, madaling ma-deploy, madaling maayos, locally available. And the most important thing, front and center of the design process is the users, yung community, no? Okay. So, katerno nung technological solution, yung organizational innovation, no, or solution, yung tech packs. Local solar responders, technicians trained in disaster risk reduction, energy needs assessment, and basic PHYB technology. So their mission is to provide renewable energy during disasters and blackouts. However, the tech packs can be used, no, during normal times dahil hindi naman araw-araw may disaster. So during the response period or the rehabilitation stage of Yolanda, early recovery, no, the solar tech packs serve as community charging stations in the urban poor communities in Tacloban, in the upland communities of Samar, and in the coastal communities of both Leyte and Samar. So yun yung silbi niya. And most of our solar scholars, I think we've already reached more or less 400 plus, no, are based in Eastern Visayas, and majority of them are women, proving our thesis that technology is not the monopoly of men, no. Yung mga babae, kababaihan, solar lola, solar nanay, solar ate, no, kayang gamitin ang solar para sa hindi lamang para sa disaster risk reduction, kundi pati sa community development, no? As long as bigyan natin sila ng pagkakataon para matutunan ang technology. Okay. So these are the solar scholars in action during the July 27 Leyte earthquake, kung saan nasira yung geothermal plants sa Palanga at Ormoc. So halos isang buwan wala. So charging stations yung tech packs. Typhoon Ompong sa Cagayan, we went there and trained the locals, including local electricians, on how to assemble the tech pack para sila na yung kayang gumawa, no? And Ulysses, Dumagat and Remontado communities. And the latest is in Surigao del Norte, no? So before Odette hit Surigao del Norte, I think more than a week we conducted the solar training there and deployed tech packs, which were now prepositioned in the LGUs and the DRRM offices used by trained solar scholars. So yeah, no, powering the MDRRM offices to produce RDNA reports, charging mobile phones, relief operations, etc. And also, no, we also deployed solar rooftop in the DRRM offices. Actually, the direction should be to utilize, no, the rooftops of public buildings for solar rooftop. Dahil malaking bagay na magamit mo yung rooftop ng mga public buildings as long as maganda yung orientasyon, dig-on o matibay sa salitang waray, no? Para may backup power yung government offices and also reduce their power cost if they're within the grid, no? So ito sa Salcedo, Eastern Samar. And dulo, no, starting with tech packs and small RE projects, the direction now is to push for hybrids, marrying solar, wind, with diesel spag, no, napor spag. Hindi naman namin tatapon yung napor spag generator sa dagat. Hindi po. Ikakasalang sila, no? Dahil backup rin yan. Nang sa ganun, these small islands can achieve 24/7 electrification. As of now, usually the hours of electricity in small islands is 6 to 8 hours, no? So what is the way forward to achieving island electrification? So you harness the power of the sun, you harness the wind, and even the ocean tides to generate local, clean, and renewable energy. Okay. So gusto ko lang pong sagutin yung punto na na yung solar daw medyo mahirap i-deploy pati mahal. No, okay. So this is Suluan Island. Ito yung diesel spag, no? Kulang-kulang sa 50 kilowatt yung capacity ng diesel plant. One alternative is to set up a 100 kilowatt solar farm near the diesel spag diesel plant, no? The problem is they did not carry out a risk assessment. This area in zone 1, right, was hit by the storm surge at the height of Yolanda. So ang dagat dyan hanggang dibdib. Yung spag, katabi lang ng dagat. Paano, kahit ilayo mo tong solar farm na 100 kilowatt, baka lamunin pa rin ng dagat pag mag-surge, no? So may problema yung risk assessment niya. But there's a model that we can follow. That's already a proof of concept, no, undertaken by the visionary cooperative of Romelco, no? Ng Romblon. So, yung mga covered court, no? As long as matibay yung pagkakagawa, ay pwede mong lagyan ng solar rooftop. No? Sa estimate nila, ito 200 kilowatt. Paano kasi kada covered court in the Philippines, there are in every barangay there's itataya ko yung natitirang buhok sa ulo ko. Tsak dyan may covered court. Makinig sa basketball yung Pinoy. So in other words, sa isang covered court, kaya mong magkabit dyan ng 50 kilowatt. No? Dahil 4 na covered court yung pinagkabitan nila, ang total 200 kilowatts. No? So stands to benefit 10,823 consumers. No? The project cost is 12 million. In other words, yung cost ng bawat covered court, no, ay 3 million. Tapos yung subsidized subsidized cost of generation niya, 5 piso 64 cents per kilowatt. Pero yung true cost of generation 8.92 kilowatt hours, no. Ngayon ang kainaman diyan, no, it will only take 5 days to install this solar rooftop. So napakabilis. It will only take 5 trained PV technician to install this. In other words, ang bilis ng deployment, no, hindi gaanong matagal. And the good thing about is, sa loob ng 1 taon, 2 beses mo lang i-maintain yan. You have to clean the panels, no, yung mga dumi, etc. Pero 2 beses lang. So, sangka pa. Sa saluan, merong covered court, no? Pwede kang maglagay ng 50 kilowatts dyan. Pwede kang maglagay ng lithium battery storage, no? Lithium-ion battery storage. Then ito, ang ganda ng orientasyon, facing south. So in other words, you don't need to set up a solar farm near the high-risk area of the spark generator, but you can use existing facilities owned by the barangay and the municipality of Giwan. The key here is to conduct a assessment kung talagang matibay yung covered court at madaling at kung hindi naman kailangang i-retrofit. So, pwede pa ba o masyado na matagal? This is my reaction to the presentation earlier. No? What are the barriers to the just energy transition? Aminin na natin, iba talaga yung preference sa coal plants. No? Utilize imported rather than indigenous resources. You know, this point is really glaring right now because di ba nag-impose ng ban on coal importation yung Indonesia. Yung malalaking coal plants owners sa Pilipinas, namumblema na kung saan nila kukunin yung coal nila. Dahil nag-impose ng ban on exportation pala ng coal yung Indonesia, the biggest supplier of coal. It increases greenhouse gases emissions, makes integration of variable RE difficult. Actually, tingin ko pag tinatanong nyo, bakit hindi natin mapalaki yung target ng RE by 2030 hanggang 2050? Tingin ko ito yung malaking ano eh. The elephant inside the room. At pangalawa, dapat yung automatic cost pass provisions. Ang nangyayari kasi, yung pag tumataas yung presyo ng coal o kahit ng coal at iba pang nag-fluctuate yung exchange rate, kadaling ipasa ng mga big power players sa sa customer, no? Tapos ang problema pa, guaranteed yung returns nila over 40 years or more. Automatic cost pass-through makes coal power prices appear to be least cost option without considering external costs, price fluctuation, and energy security. At yung usual na problema, ma'am, ang nagawa po ng report na to ay yung aming energy advisor sa ICSC, si Pete Maniego, no? So red tape, 165 permits, thousands of signatures. At yung mga sinabi ni ma'am kanina na mga mekanismo para ma-increase yung energy mix, yung RE mix sa atin, medyo mabagal talaga yung pagpapatupad, no? As ito, no, inadequate long-term planning. As yung stranded cost, no, yung pinakamasaklap kasi tumaya tayo sa coal, as merong nakapilang 20 committed at indicative coal plants, talingay yung ating kamay sa coal. Paano kung halimbawa tumaas yung presyo niya, tapos dumalas yung mga brownout dahil lagi nagsisira yung coal plant. Ito nangyari nung May to June, ngayong last year, no? So nakatali yung kamay natin dun sa coal at hindi natin magawa yung isang alternative pathway na palakasin yung renewable. Ito importante, no? Walang definite transition plan from centralized to distributed generation. Ang punto kasi dito, no, isang archipelago, the Philippines is an archipelago. So the best solution is to adopt a distributed generation model, no? Ibig sabihin, yung energy generation, dali natin mismo sa community, no? Dahil pag RE yan, wala ka lang bibiling fuel, zero marginal cost. Pangalawa, pwede mong i-adapt yung mga bagong technology sa energy storage para maging reliable yung supply mo, no? Pagkatapos, dahil wala ng transmission at distribution lines galing sa malayong planta, liliit na yung gastos mo sa capex, pati yung mga systems losses. At yung isang punto, no, na laging wala, no? Gusto ko rin i-post to kay ma'am. In the crafting of the National Energy Plan, are the LGUs, the CSOs in the communities, part of the planning process? Paano kasi, sample lang po ma'am, no? Ang bawat LGU, merong tinatawag na obligado, no, na gumawa ng DRRM plan. Kailangan gumawa ng LCCAP, Local Climate Change Adaptation Plan. Kailangan gumawa ng land use plan. Pagkarami-raming plano. Pero ang question, binibigyan ba sila ng puwang at ina-empower para planuhin yung pangangailangan nila sa enerhiya sa kanilang mismong lugar? Sabi kasi ng physics professor ko, no, energy is the ability to do work. Pagising sa umaga hanggang sa gabi, kailangan mo ng enerhiya. Bakit ngayon hindi nagpaplano yung mga LGU para sa enerhiya? In my view, if the LGUs and the communities will be involved in energy planning, no, yung mga issue ng mainam bang mag-adapt tayo ng solar rooftop, mainam bang gumamit tayo ng RE for livelihoods, etc., ay baka pwedeng mas madaling masagot. So ito yung the future that I'm proposing that we imagine. No? Today we are centralized, no, in distribution. Planta, NGCP, co-op, distribution line, Meralco, bahay, building, etc. Ang problema niyan, katulad nung nangyari ngayon, nagdaan si Odette, sinira ang transmission line sa Surigao del Sur, Surigao del Norte, Agusan, Southern Leyte, Bohol, Cebu, Negros, at yung distribution line, wala nang kuryente. Problema yan, di ba? Samantalang, kung ang gagawin natin ay distributed o decentralized generation, na andun pa rin yung main line, yung planta, pero bawat lokalidad ay binibigyan mo ng karapatan, kapangyarihan na maging producer ng kanilang enerhiya. Dahil hindi tali, no? Hindi magkakabit ang bituka ng lahat na yan. At ito parang may mga microgrid dyan na kaya magkaroon ng kuryente, no? Using energy that is local, renewable, and the best kung community-owned. Pag magkaroon ng panibagong bagyo, no, gagana pa rin yung microgrid dito kahit naputol na yung transmission at distribution line. Dahil archipelago nga yung Pilipinas, no? Talagang may mga submarine cable dyan, di ba? Pero wala pa yata yung from Visayas to Mindanao. Pero ito siguro ang pwede nating pag-aralan. Food for thought lang po. Last point na lang po, no? In our experience, our work is not just about providing physical power to people and communities, but building and strengthening people's power. This is energy democracy. It means people in the communities are innovators, planners, and decision makers on how to use and create energy that is local, renewable, and community-owned. Damang salamat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arturo, for that very insightful presentation. I like how you presented your reaction by starting off with the impact of renewable energy in communities, particularly in sectors of education, environment, livelihood, and even social innovation, because you presented a very comprehensive documentations of the things that you're actually implementing in your organization. Unfortunately, Mr. Ian Rivera of the Philippine Movement of Climate Justice won't be able to join us due to some technical difficulty. So we can now proceed with the open forum. Again, as a gentle reminder, you may type in your questions in the chat box or in the Q&A chat box, and you may also choose to be anonymous. May we invite our speakers and reactor to join us for the open forum.
All right, Norby, we received a lot of questions coming from our very much active participants. So we have different set of questions for our speakers. But of course, if our reactors or the other speakers would want to respond to the question that's addressed to a specific speaker, then that is totally okay, just to make our discussion more productive and meaningful. All right, so I'll first read a question. The first question is for Director Maylene. Does the Philippines have specific plans and policy around transitioning the coal assets? Do we envision generation that is 100% renewable energy?
Yes, actually the National Renewable Energy Plan and the Philippine Energy Plan, as indicated earlier, is now gearing to a cleaner energy scenario. So we're putting in place right now the necessary policies and programs to develop. As far as the coal development is concerned, no, in terms of power, we have issued a moratorium, no? And we have stopped allowing the power projects that will use coal. No, but of course, in banning coal, no, we allowed those that have started or part of the Philippine Energy Plan, specifically as committed project, and those that have been listed in the indicative power plant projects of the country.
Thank you, Director Maylene. Norby, do you have more
Okay.
questions for
I
the
think
speakers?
this question is for Dean Tony Lavinia. What is the interconnected green grid? Why do you think only 2 ASEAN countries said yes to this?
Well, it's a grid that will be connecting, and I suppose this is just for mainland Southeast Asia, no? Because I cannot imagine an underground grid for the Philippines and Indonesia. So probably for mainland that will connect renewable energy sources to the grid for those countries that are there. I mean, it's always difficult to do something in ASEAN that's transboundary. It's just always difficult because countries are very zealous of their boundaries. No? Kaya, di ba hanggang ngayon we're having problems dealing with haze in Indonesia, for example, because of the notion that these are all sovereign territory. No? So that's always been a challenge of ASEAN in the work that I have done, extensive work I've done on marine issues in Southeast Asia. That's been a challenge as well.
Thank you, Dean Tony. So I have a question. This is addressed, any one of the speakers can answer this question, but it's specifically addressed to Dean Tony. So the question is, net zero by 2050 with only 50% renewable energy share. How does this work? it seemed to be impossible for the Philippines to be net zero. If its resources is only 50% from non-renewable resources, can DOE explain how they can justify their renewable energy target? Dean Tony, you can answer first.
Well, just that overall, no. I mean, overall, the energy transition, in fact, requires you to go 100% zero fossil fuel. You know, I'm not gonna say 100% renewable. There might be other sources that will be developed and other technologies that will be developed, but you know, that's gonna be going to be your goal. In the Philippines, in particular, we don't have as much options for sequestration as other countries might have. I mean, so that's why. But there's no doubt it's going to be challenging. I'm not gonna. That's why I was saying na. In fact, I was surprised na nag-net zero na pala almost everyone in the region in terms of vision, and it's in fact is the ASEAN vision is net zero by 2050. And that surprised me when I was preparing for this talk and just updating myself na now we did that and we adopted that in October 2021. I mean, excluding the Philippines, no? As I said, the Philippines has not articulated yet a net zero goal on a particular year. But that subject to what you mean by net zero, that's really the goal that you want to have if you want to solve climate change. I mean, you want to decarbonize your economy. All economies of the world economy has to be decarbonized. Otherwise, you will not solve the climate change problem, which means that whatever, you know, the justification for energy is you need it for development. But if climate change destroys all your development prospects, why will you even, diba? Why will you even create energy systems for development if that development has no direction and will be completely destroyed by events like Odette, which will be double, triple, quadruple its force 10 or 20 years from now, or even 5 years from now? What's the purpose of an energy system that develops society when that society completely gets destroyed because the energy system you use contributed to that destruction? Parang it doesn't make sense, diba?
Yeah, thank you very much, Tin Tony, for highlighting that. I think Mr. Arturo Tahop earlier mentioned about the need to involve local communities and stakeholders into the energy planning process. And earlier, Director Kapungkol mentioned that some municipalities are starting to venture into biomass energy. So the question is, beyond municipalities, this is addressed to Director Mylene, beyond municipalities, is it possible to transition to renewable energy on a more micro level? Example is household level and barangay level.
Yeah, thank you, Norby. No? Actually, the Department of Energy has been doing renewable energy plans and program as part of the total electrification program. And we have already initiated some microgrid system. Please note that all the projects are private sector driven, although the government provides, as part of the GAA, around 500 million a year for total electrification, and that would cover extension of existing facilities, distribution system, as well as renewable energy like solar electrification or mini grid system. As far as the involving the local government, the Department of Energy is currently doing provincial renewable energy plan, like in the province of Iloilo, Palawan, and now we're working with I think for Oriental Mindoro and some other municipalities that we saw there are potential renewable energy sources as well as potential interest from the private sector or the government itself, the LGU.
Yeah, maybe just as a follow-up question to that, Director Mylene. Earlier you presented the information, the the commitments of the government to transition to renewable energy. And one of the participants noticed that there was a decline in terms of the target with regard to the Philippine Energy Plan. So I think the question is, why did RE share diminish from 34% in 2008 after that year? And why is the target market share in the Philippine Energy Plan set to just 35%?
Yes. Thank you, no, for that. No, actually, we noted, no, that is the challenge we face, no, with the dwindling share of renewable, no. But because during that time, it took time for the Department of Energy and some other regulatory programs to set in, like what have been the RE policy mechanism that had been put in place, no, under the RE Act. Like for example, Renewable Portfolio Standard, which is a mandatory program, was delayed. Why? Because there was a hesitance and an objection from the distribution utility, because it will, according to them, it will increase the rates to the customer. So it was only in 27 that the Department of Energy really pursued the issuance of the policies on the renewable portfolio standards. Recently, this starting 2017 onwards, you may notice that the Department of Energy has laid out all the policies. So we're now moving into the implementation of these policies and programs.
Like any reaction from Mr. Arturo and Dito?
Yeah, I actually just thank you, Director Marlene, and I support completely what Dr. Marlene, and also Arturo's presentation earlier was really quite inspiring of the things that are happening. But this is what do you call this? It's not rocket science that in a archipelago, diba? In everywhere except in the big islands where you have to have other options also on a greater mix, diba? That renewable energy is really your only options for all the other. I mean, parang ano, diba? Parang it's not rocket science to get there, diba? And again, going to, kasi my topic was Southeast Asia, it's the same in Southeast Asia in so many places. That's really just what you have to do. That's why very important to, and here this thinking also is very important. It's actually very important to think beyond sort of the grid type of thinking, the traditional grid-like thinking, diba? Which we know is in the Philippine context, global context even, is so inefficient. So much, lots of problems with grid-like type of ano. I mean, I think many parts of the world that's changing also, even in cities, no? For example, rooftop solar, diba? You don't need a grid anymore if you're gonna scale up rooftop solar in your cities where everyone powers themselves, diba? You need a grid in a way to sell back something for net metering, etc. But you can figure that out. That's so I think we need to also be able to think like that, diba? So that we forget about, diba, about the nuclear option, diba? Forget about supercritical coal. Yung mga ganong klase na ano na attractive kasi mahal-mahal, and people, unfortunately, government, they like bigger projects, the bigger they like those type of projects, but we need to think, and I think sort of a community scale approach of looking at this tells you why it's doable.
Thank you so much,
like,
Dean. Yes.
I'd like to add, my presentation, it seems like I'm a pessimist, no? But I applaud the efforts of DOE, right, to really fast track the completing the implementation guidelines and rolling out the different packages, no, from RPS, net metering, etc. And also, let's also look at the bright side. Private business, no, has also entered in the RE, no, RE generation. Siyempre, Aboitiz. Dating nasa Kulo, Aboitiz. Na Lopez, sa bagay, Lopez sa ano sila, sa geothermal, no? Tapos yung Ayala, no? They even invested outside of the Philippines, no? They set up their RE plants, no? So, good news 'yun. Pero ang punto ko lang kasi, baka tingnan rin natin yung mas kiling ako sa community base eh. Ano kasi, local scale, nakakakilala tayo, alam natin yung ecosystem natin, bioregions, alam natin yung pangailangan natin, di ba? At madaling mag-usap at lutasin yung problema on the ground. Kaya mag-isip tayo ng mga technological solution na napakamahal and worse, nag-contribute pa sa pollutions pati sa climate crisis, di ba? So, mas mainam na palakasin yung pamayanan. So, that's exactly where I'm coming from when I'm pushing that local government units, di ba? May mandalas ruling na eh. Kaya nga halimbawa, pag sabihin ng LGU, hindi namin kaya mag-install ng solar rooftop, di ba? Lumalaki na yata yung pera nyo eh, di ba? Depende na lang kung naubos na sa COVID response. Pero ang punto ko, di ba, naandyan na yung naandyan na yung teknolohiya, naandyan na yung resources, di ba? Ang kulang na lang yung yung kagustuhan na gawin. Yun lang yung punto ko.
To be honest, Sir Arturo, we really share the same sentiment, most especially because the people on the grounds are the ones who experience power disruptions and experience blackouts. So it's just very important to capacitate and just provide these individuals the training and the equipment that they need for renewable energy generation. So just to go beyond what's happening on the ground and here in the Philippine context, there is a question. The question is, how does this transition to renewable energy significantly affect our diplomatic ties with the oil-producing states of West Asia, which employ our OFWs? So maybe Dean Tony can respond to that question.
I'm not sure I got the OFW part. Can you repeat that, Chelsea? Sorry.
Okay, so the question, Dean, is in this transition to renewable energy, how does this affect our diplomatic ties with the oil-producing states of West Asia, which also employ our OFWs?
Doesn't. I'll tell you a story. In the early years of the climate change negotiations, we, in fact, in the Philippine government, we had lots of debate on that particular issue kasi may tayong OFW, we relied on oil also from Saudi Arabia, di ba? And so people like me who was pushing climate justice perspective even then and then renewable energy perspective, talagang pinupush back kami including our colleagues in the DFA, di ba? And we would have long debates, but finally we'd always resolve, no. Philippines, and correct, di ba? Correct. Philippines will be a victim of climate change. That has to be the priority, not the OFWs, not the oil, diba? Not the relationship with the priority has to be the fact that we will be a big victim of climate change. This is 30 years ago, 30 years ago na resolve na namin na debate. All the way then to the president, to President Ramos. President Ramos ordered us in Kyoto, no, ignore the diba? True enough, dun sa Kyoto, I was the chief negotiator of the Philippines. And nung patapos na yung negotiations and it looked like we'd have an agreement at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning na patapos na yung negotiation, pinatawag ako ng oil minister ng Saudi Arabia, who was the head of delegation of Saudi Arabia. Pinatawag ako. Pinagalitan ako, to be honest, di ba? Siyempre, hindi naman ako minister, so pwede niya akong pagalitan. Siyempre, yung minister ko, hindi ako papayag na papagalitan niya yung si Secretary Ramos was with me. But hindi naman wise enough, hindi sumama si Secretary Ramos, ako lang pinapunta. Pinagalitan ako, sabi, do you know, precisely what you just said, do you know that you have so millions of OFWs in the Philippines? Sabi ko, do you know that there are 2 million OFWs in the Philippines, but there are 80 million Filipinos that will suffer because of climate change? Ito, mahimik na siya. It didn't have any effect on our relationship on the OFWs. Nag-double pa, nag-triple pa yung OFWs after. And in Paris, just to end note that to, di ba, kasi that was 1997 when the oil minister of Saudi Arabia sort of kind of threatened me with that, di ba? Na-publish yan kasi pa-interview talaga ako. So na-publish siya sa several newspapers sa Pilipinas na pinatawag ako ng oil minister doon. Hindi naman ako takot kasi di ba? Alam ko naman na my president sided with me. Sa Paris 2015, I was the negotiator again of the Philippines, or one of the negotiators. Ako yung nag-bilateral with Saudi Arabia. Also, ganun na naman, the top, I don't know if oil minister nila yon, basta yung minister nila na nandun sa negotiations. And I asked very explicitly, sabi ko, we want you to support 1.5 as the target for the Paris Agreement. And I want to ask that in behalf of our OFWs in Saudi Arabia, because you too will be affected by climate change. Tumawa lang siya. Sabi niya, ikaw ha? But sabi niya, okay, we will accept the language, but they did not accept we compromised on the language in the Paris Agreement. And hopefully now that compromise will be set aside and we will now have 1.5 as the target by the next conference of the parties in Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt in COP27 is we have to get there, di ba? I just emphasize that we have to get there. It doesn't really matter what even Saudi Arabia knows we have to get there. Even the OPEC countries, we have to get there. Kasi you really cannot not get there, di ba? Because the alternative is to destroy, as I said, why would you use oil and coal for development if that development will just be destroyed by climate change? It just doesn't make sense.
Yes, Director Mingin.
Yeah, just to add to what Dean Tony has mentioned and Mr. Arturo, no? Actually, we don't see naman na magkakaroon ng negative effect yung renewable energy, no? Because in terms of power generation, napakaliit lang yung share ng ating oil-based power plant. And normally, those are used for peaking kung bawa hindi available yung ibang mga technologies. Second, yung in terms naman dun sa transport actually ang biggest user ng ating oil, and in fact we have already what we call the electric vehicle and alternative fuels program. Biofuels program, yung ating blending nung biofuels and ethanol and biodiesel, yung CME. Yung siguro pwede lang sabihin natin ngayon is even yung IRENA, yung International Renewable Energy Network, actually is being hosted by Abu Dhabi. So even yung mga countries that are producing oil or heavy producers of oil are venturing into renewable energy or promote renewable energy development. So Abu Dhabi has been providing and hosting support for the International Renewable Energy Association, and then Saudi. So we have been receiving a lot of interest for them to provide support and facilitate renewable energy in the country.
Di ba,
So I don't think na magkakaroon.
IRENA director, di ba, is headquartered in Abu Dhabi, di ba?
Yeah, like meron kaming yung IRENA na tinatawag, it's an international association of all the countries, and we're working towards yung RE development, setting the policy standards, and they also do capacity building and then studies. So nagmi-meet po yan twice a year, and then annually yung ministerial meetings. Normally nagpa-participate po ang secretary and some senators, legislators po on that task. Thank you.
Okay. And on that note, thank you very much to our resource persons. This is a very informative webinar. Thank you, Director Mylene, Dean Tony, and Sir Arturo Tajo. Chelsea?
Thank you so much again to our speakers and We had a very productive discussion. And although we weren't able to respond to all the questions, it really shows that a lot of people are interested in learning more about the renewable trajectory here in the Philippines and, of course, within Southeast Asia. Before we proceed to the closing remarks of this program, we would like to inform everybody that the evaluation form is now available in the chat box. So we're looking forward to hearing your feedback, and hopefully your feedback would really improve us in our future events and the like. Yes, Norby?
Thank you very much, Chelsea. At this juncture, to give us short synthesis and her closing remarks, may I call on Ms. Lisel Sapra, our team leader and a PhD student of the Tri-College program of UP Diliman.
Good afternoon, everyone, and Happy New Year. So let me just give you a brief synthesis of what transpired in today's webinar. Tracking the trajectory of renewable energy in the Philippines, Director Kapungkol delivered a talk about the current status of the RE sector in the Philippines and the various government plans, programs, projects to further develop the RE towards attaining cleaner and sustainable energy sector. The presentation highlighted the policy mechanisms that are intended to support our investments in the country, thereby paving the way to the accelerated growth of the RE industry that will create jobs, support the government energy security and sustainability, and empower electricity consumer from choosing RE as their choice of supply of choice. Now, the proposed 2020-2040 National Renewable Energy Plan, as mentioned in the discussion, was also discussed, which sets a target of achieving at least 35% RE share in the power generation mix by 2030, driving towards a 50% RE share by 2040, dominating the mix. The discussion ended with a call for us to be resilient and keep going. Attorney Lavinia, on the other hand, discussed the impacts of climate change. Expert in this field, Attorney Lavinia argued that there have been increasing gas emissions because of forest, agriculture, energy, and urban emissions. Reviewing the Committee of ASEAN countries, there is a long way for the Philippines to go, and there is a strong need to radically transform that trajectory. RE provides the best opportunity in doing so. And the discussion also ended with a reminder that let us not contribute to our own destruction. Okay, these profound lectures were further substantiated by our dear reactor, Mr. Tahu, who focused more on the more grounded side. Those who are in the laylayan, or those who don't have enough means, maybe to install RE in communities. Problems like no adequate education, technicians, and engineers have been mentioned. He also focused on the benefits of RE to the community, like solar power from homes to schools, to community-driven RE project, vaccination sites, and also to the disaster risk reduction and small islands. Sana pati Siargao, di ba, maabot. Benefits also, it also benefits the environment, the businesses, and the growth of cooperatives. According to him, let us harness the benefits of the sun, the ocean, the wind, because they are clean and they are renewable energy sources. Barriers to just energy have been identified by problems in the implementation, processes, bureaucracy, distribution, and inclusion of LGUs in the energy planning. Now, with this, let me thank the following people for making this webinar possible and successful. For the speakers, thank you for accepting our invitation, and thank you for sparing your valuable time and expertise by providing us additional information and knowledge about RE and RE capacity and issues in the Philippines. To our dear reactor, Mr. Tahu, thank you also for sparing us your time and expertise in giving us additional information about RE. To Dean Dr. Henelito A. Sevilla, thank you for providing the class enormous knowledge about the history, the current state, and the future of RE, not only in the Philippines, but also the resource competition among producing and consuming countries. This course has made an impact not only to our scholarship, but also to our practicality of life. Thank you also for giving us a chance and the trust that you have given us to conduct this webinar. For PS279 class, thank you for the wonderful experience of collaborating, working, and learning with each other, not only on our academic matters, but also in fostering good connections and camaraderie. Ladies and gentlemen, these people work behind the scenes and made possible in materializing this program is workloads and different time availability. Actually, we meet only Sundays, gabi pa. Not only that these people were able to share the know-how about RE, but also the class is more successful in applying all the learnings from this class in the realities of life. The class is divided into three committees: the program committee, documentation committee, and the creatives committee. The program committee includes Kat Guerrero, Leonard Ubanan, Clarissa Villamor, and our two able moderators, Chelsea Hill and Norby Salonga, and myself. Hindi pala ako kasama sa moderator. Okay, for always updating and working beyond our meetings and even during the holidays. Tagang mga workaholic. For the documentation committee, especially si Ms. Thea, composed of Thea Lucena, Corinne Escartin, Regine Molina, Francis Ramirez, because you keep on track every single details of the program. You never fail to work as a group, even during the holiday season. For the creatives committee, composed of Maika Sugitan, Thea Rivera, and Mai Suzuki, thank you for being the in-house ideators and implementers of the media marketing, attend engagement, and more. You actually build the brand of this event and you ensure its consistency throughout the entire event, from the pre-event marketing to maybe after the event survey. For Sir Janus Nolasco, Miss Princess, and the whole Asian Center community, thank you for providing us all the assistance that we need, from the PubMat to the tech run last night until today before this webinar starts. Thank you very much. And also for the participants, thank you all. For those who have joined us in this webinar, this event will not be as successful as it is without you and your desire to know more about the energy issues in the Philippines. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I am formally closing the program. Thank you for active participation. Be safe and stay healthy.
Thank you so much, Lizelle, for the shout out as well and
Yeah.
for synthesizing the entire program. So maraming salamat po to everyone that was mentioned by Lizelle and for joining us today. Can we just request everybody, especially our speakers and the organizers, we will be having our short photo opportunities.
And just a gentle reminder for those who have not filled out the evaluation sheet yet, it's actually posted in the chat box. The link is posted in the chat box. Looking forward to your response. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much to our documentation team. So thank you once again for attending this webinar. This event is brought to you by the UP Asian Center. Would like to invite everyone to please follow the Asian Center through its social media accounts as flashed on screen. We'd also like to invite you to check out the programs of Asian Center as well as the PhD Tri-College Philippine Studies program. You may visit the website of the Asian Center, ac.upd.edu.ph, for more information. Again, this has been Norby Salonga.
And this has been Chelsea Hill, and thank you so much for joining us. And mabuhay, and see you all hopefully for a more renewable energy kind of country. Thank you.
Thank you everyone. Have a great weekend.